slide
Yeah.
screen mode,
No?
which you're close to doing.
Okay, now it's
There you go.
Perfect. Very good.
Yep.
okay. So kind of talk about policy changes here for a net carbon future, particularly about electric vehicles and building electrification. And why won't that advance? Okay.
Gary,
So-
will the slides be available?
Yeah, well, yeah, I can make the slides available.
Thank you so much. So we don't have to take notes.
Yeah. So here you see, I'm going to play this in a little bit. This fellow, Tony Seba, wrote this book in, I guess, early 2012, 2013. And I read it a little partly, and I figured, oh, this guy's just taking optimistic point of view on things. He doesn't know any more than anybody else. But then I began to see some of his videos on YouTube, and I took a second look at the book, and I read the book. Okay. So let's go back. So let us play one of his videos, which goes about 30 minutes, and then we'll talk about what you've seen.
Next up, please welcome Tony Seba from Clean Disruption Inc., here to talk to us about why energy and transportation will be obsolete.
So everybody okay? Can you hear that well?
Yes.
By 2030.
Thank you, Robin Hood. Thank you so much, and thanks you all for being here tonight. I am going to take you to the future of energy and transportation, but before I do that, I'm going to take you into the past. New York City, we are in New York, Easter Parade, 1900. We used horses as our main means of transportation for thousands of years. There is one car in this picture, one car in a sea of horses. Can anyone see the one car in that picture? There. One car. 13 years later, just 13 years in a sea of cars, can anyone see the one horse in that picture? That's all it took, 13 years for New York to go from all horse minus one to all cars. This is more than a century ago. This is the very definition of a technology disruption. So what is a technology disruption? It's when new products and services create new markets, and right then and there, or eventually, they radically transform industries or actually collapse that conventional industry. And one of the things that are interesting about disruptions is that tastes and preferences change very quickly. So what happened to all those horses that were disrupted? We ate them. I mean, not we, not you or me, but essentially they became fashionable as meat, right? And that's what happened. Tastes and preferences change, and even pet food was made with horse meat for a long time, for decades. That's in America. So I'll take you to 1995, when the then largest telecom company on earth, then largest, hired McKinsey to answer one question. In 15 years, what's going to be the adoption of this new thing called the cell phone? 15-year projection, McKinsey. Their answer was 900,000. In the year 2000, AT&T, you're going to have 900,000 subscribers. The actual number was 109 million subscribers. This is not a small mistake, right? This is a factor of 120 times, right? My little dog could have done better and not charged as much, right? But you know, the thing is that it is usually experts and insiders and mainstream analysts who dismiss disruption opportunities, really, really smart people with a lot of data or access to a lot of data. I mean, the cover of Forbes magazine in November 2007 said, can anyone stop Nokia? What else happened in 2007? Right? I'll talk about that. But even now, the smartest company, industrial company in America, basically GE lost 70+%. Some of you may have lost some money because they thought that natural gas and nukes and so on were going to keep growing for a couple of decades. And GE Power got wiped out. And that is the idea, what I call market trauma, right? And I'll define that in a second, but here's the question that I've asked myself for 15 years. Why do smart people in smart companies consistently dismiss market opportunities and disruption consistently? So I have been working to create a framework to understand technology going forward, because history is interesting, but it's not very useful if you're an investor or you're a corporate executive, right? And I'll walk you quickly through some of the important things. One is, of course, technology. Every single technology has a cost curve. It improves every year at different rates, and that's what makes them interesting. We know about Moore's law, but do we know at which rate data storage or DNA sampling, so every technology has its own cost curve. But technologies alone don't enable disruptions. The other thing to take into account is S-curves. We see a lot of linear projections, but every single adoption in history, and when I say history, I mean history, 10,000 years, has been adopted as S-curve. Never as a line, always as an S-curve. Now, this is color television, but transportation is not color television, right? So I went back to the horses and the cars to see how that adoption happened. And it went from essentially nothing to 95% of the market in 20 years. In America, 20 years. But here's the most interesting part. From 11%, the tipping point, to about 80%, happened in just 10 years. That's it. While we built two brand new industries, oil and auto, while we built a whole new road transportation system, and while we fought a major war. And the disruption still happened in 10 years. So any excuse that transportation disruption cannot happen in 10 years is not looking at the evidence of what really has happened. And all S-curves are actually accelerating. I mean, if you think that the market is accelerating and things are changing faster and faster, it's because it is. Now, in weeks or months, you're sideswiped in your history because S-curves are getting faster and faster. Now, technology in and of itself is not what causes disruption, it's convergence. So in 2007, the smartphone that you have, both Apple and Google came up with the smartphone in 2007. Now, why not 2005 or 2009? Why not, right? That's because all the technologies that made a $600 smartphone possible happened in 2007. So anybody could have done it. Nokia could have done it, remember then? Motorola could have done it, remember then? But another lesson is, A, the convergence, but the other one is disruptions happen from the outside. Neither Google nor Apple had ever built a phone before. So why them? Because disruptions happen from the outside. Business model innovation is every bit as disruptive as technology itself. We know all about Uber, right? They were started 2009, and within 7 years, they had more bookings than the whole taxi industry in America. In 7 years, from an apartment in San Francisco to more bookings than the whole taxi industry, right? Within 8 years, Uber and Lyft had 20% of the VMCs, of the vehicle miles traveled in several cities, including San Francisco. 8 years, talk about a disruption. And the disruption is not just taxis. We are seeing a peak in new car sales, and there's a reason for that. The reason is that we're opting to not buy new cars already, right? So I had predicted peak car by 2020, and of course I was called insane. Guess what? This year, India car sales went down, America went down, Europe went down, and China went down. I may have been off by a year early, right? Peak car is already here, and market trauma is the idea that you hear, oh, it's going to take a long time, a decade or 2 decades for whatever solar or batteries or whatnot to become mainstream. That may well be the case, but the financial impact can happen right away. So if you lost money on GE, that's called market trauma, right? That's because the financial impact can happen right away because of disruptive technologies. 2-3% market penetration, gone, right? And that's what happens to a lot of companies. So what are the key technologies that I'm looking at that in my work, I think are gonna essentially disrupt all sectors in the 2020s, every single last one of them. These technologies, now this is not comprehensive enough, but I'm just one person, right? And I'll talk about using this framework and these technologies to understand how transportation and energy will be disrupted. I'll focus on transportation. So in 2014, 5+ years ago, I published a book called Clean Disruption, where I made a lot of what then were considered pretty insane predictions. And I'll go over that. But these are the 4 technologies plus 1 business model that are disruptive in and of themselves. But when you converge those technologies, essentially they're super disruptive. And by 2030, they're going to wipe out conventional energy and transport as we know it. So I'm going to walk you through that. Batteries is the number 1. I mean, not the most important, but the first technology. And this is exactly the cost curve that I published 5.5 years ago. And of course, I was called insane. It's not going to go down by 80% in 5 years, I was told many times. They were right. It's gone down by 90%. I mean, it's gone down actually much faster. And that's because of a number of things, right? And what happens when the cost curve is like that? If you take the example of Australia, in South Australia, the biggest battery on the grid back then, now it's not the biggest one anymore, but that battery was just 2% of that market, 2%. Within weeks, it wiped out 90% of the revenues in that market from the ancillary services providers. Weeks, that's market trauma, right? Just a 2% market penetration, done, right? That's disruption for you. So my prediction has been that first, batteries plus solar and wind are going to disrupt or have already disrupted ancillary services. Then peakers, I made the prediction that by 2020, peakers are going to be obsolete, gone, no more peakers, right? And then baseload. And when is that baseload going to happen? Soon enough, right? Now, when the battery costs come down, that enables another disruption, EVs. And so the question is the EV disruptive, or is it a greeny, commie conspiracy against oil companies? And of course, the other question is, who can afford an electric vehicle? Not me. I mean, look at my suit, 10-year-old picture, same suit. I don't even own a car, let alone an EV, right? But is the EV disruptive? Well, I'll give you many reasons. I can give you many reasons, but I'll just walk you through a few. One is that on a per mile basis, EVs are 10 times cheaper to power than internal combustion engine automobiles or trucks or whatever. An EV has 20+ moving parts versus 2,000+ for an internal combustion engine. EVs have exactly zero maintenance or near zero. And that's why companies can give infinite mile warranty because they can. And this is something that you won't hear about still in mainstream analysis.
Gary, would you mind muting your microphone and also the video?
Miles plus, and that makes them super disruptive. Of course, they say individuals only drive 10,000 miles a year. Why is, I mean, it would take us 50 years to
That muted the presentation as well, unfortunately. Gary, the presentation is muted.
be or
Perfect.
be internal combustion engine automobiles or vans. So it becomes interesting if you are a fleet. And that's exactly what's going on. So what is the electric vehicle cost curve? And this is exactly what I published in 2014. And, you know, essentially I said by early 2019, the market is going to have an unsubsidized 200-mile electric vehicle for $35,000 by early 2019. Thank you, Tesla, right? I mean, it's happened exactly on the money, as I predicted. Of course, back then I was insane. Now, of course, everybody knows it. But if you continue that cost curve, what that cost curve says is that by 2025, all vehicles are going to be electric. All cars, all trucks, all vans, for purely economic reasons. Because by 2025, we're going to have $10,000 EVs with 200-mile range. Done. No more gasoline vehicles or diesel. 2025, right? Is that happening? Well, it is. I mean, go to China and you can already start seeing the $15,000 to $20,000 EVs with 300-kilometer range. So Amazon, a company not known for being green, but for being green, just ordered 100,000 vans starting 2021 on the dot, as I predicted, because it makes economic sense. 100,000 vans, new business model also. Now, autonomous vehicles, you know, you hear a lot about autonomous vehicles. Everyone, seemingly, OEMs are investing in autonomous technology, not just the Silicon Valley companies, everyone. Tens of billions of dollars going into this market. Why? Right? By the way, all you need is one autonomous vehicle. So autonomous technology is an operating system. If you consider the history of computing, operating systems, all you need is one. It's like a spouse. All you need is one, right? And you know, essentially, Apple did not wait for anybody else to launch iOS, right? They just launched it. And the other lesson is that in the end, because of network effects, two companies are going to own 90+% of the market. So Android and iOS, Windows and Mac, and so on and so forth. A third, maybe like Linux, but that's it. I mean, no more than that. And all you need is one company to get level 4, not 5, level 4, which is geofenced, in order for this market to happen. Now, Waymo just ordered 62,000 cars to be launched in 2020 and 21 already, right? Are they that interesting that they're already buying cars, right? Billions of dollars. Now, how expensive are they going to be? Isn't autonomous technology expensive? I'm going to show you the cost curve of supercomputing, which is what you need for autonomous technology. This is the world's largest supercomputer, most powerful supercomputer in the year 2000. It was almost $50 million for 1 teraflops, 1 trillion operations per second. 50 million, 1 teraflops. By 2016, you could buy 8 teraflops, which is more or less what you need for level 4, for $600. That's an improvement of, you know, nearly 1 million times, right? 1 million times improvement. And if you have an Apple 10, you already have 5 trillion operations per second for free. Done, right? For free. You can get basically the equivalent of $250 million of supercomputing, which is why companies like NVIDIA and Tesla and so on are developing multi-hundred trillion operations per second computing, right? Because that's what you need. But if there's anything that I want you to walk away with is this: artificial intelligence, learning is improving not just exponentially, but double exponentially. Both the hardware and the software are improving exponentially. So the combination is double exponential. And this is an example what Google Mind, DeepMind did with Go. I mean, in 3 years, that's all it took them to go from playing 80s games to beating the European champion at Go. You could not do that before. 3 years. Within 5 months, they beat the world champion, which is an order of magnitude smarter, right, than the European champion within months. And then they took that, they shelved it, they restarted, they rebooted with just the rules of the game. No human knowledge, just the rules of the game. Within 3 days, they beat the version that beat the world champion by 100 games to 0. AI is improving at double exponential rates. Anybody who tells you we're going to wait 10 years for level 4 autonomy, I don't know if they get this double exponential. And when I say autonomous technology, I mean it for everything that moves on wheels. Um, Anything that moves on wheels is going to be autonomous. So what is the disruption? The disruption is the three technologies, the two technologies plus the business model innovation. That convergence. So let's assume it's going to happen in 2021, that we're going to have level 4 autonomous technology that is ready and is approved.
I'm sorry, Gary, but this video is not working out. Your background noise is really disrupting this. I can't hear.
Service, and it's autonomous electric and on-demand transportation.
What's going on?
Owned by fleets, not individuals, owned by fleets. The day that autonomous technology is approved, so imagine Uber, autonomous and electric. The day that's approved, the cost per mile of TaaS is going to be 10 times cheaper than the cost of owning a car. That day. So essentially that day, the decision that someone is going to have to make is, do I want to spend $50,000 to buy a car over the next 5 years, or do I want the $100 subscription to Uber or Lyft?